love it. I love it.
I know. You'd think they would be pacified, but no. And she's just doing her thing where she wants scratches. That's what that is. There's nothing else going on. It's just her wanting attention.
Is that it?
Yeah. Yeah. Ned has funny little cries when he does that stuff. So, but anyway, welcome to the Proper Scoundrels podcast, Volume 2. I am Jeremiah Davros.
I am Blake Hawthorne.
Good to have you. If you're watching, thank you for the 4 views that we got. Probably all from friends of ours. But
the only way is up, right?
Oh yeah, you got to start somewhere. I mean, there's some people who start with none, unless they watch it themselves. So always good to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So how have you been in the past 4 days?
Decent, man. Just been working a little bit, which is always a good time. I started a new book. It's called The Tip of the Spear, I believe. It was about a Green Beret that lost a leg with an IED, and he fought to get back on his ODA. So we'll see what that gets us.
I started the book, The War on Warriors by Pete Hegseth.
Okay. How is he as an author?
Wordy.
Okay.
And you have to know that, like, I read into the context and I'm like, all right, I get what you're saying. Let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses a lot of words to say what he's saying, and that's cool and all. And it's really he does a lot of churchy in it. It's not surprising to me. He's a very pronounced Christian, and I think he's a good man. I don't think he's one of those, like weird, I'm gonna kill you kind of Christians or anything. But he's got a lot of biblical breaks in the story, and so for me it's like, okay, how can I fast forward? It's like, let me find the next point that's relevant. But
interesting.
But yeah, and I think he uses a lot of description and a lot of extra words, but maybe he was trying to meet a certain word count. So I don't know, but it's not been a bad read or listen. I've been listening to it on Audible. It's probably the only guy in the gym who's listening to an audiobook while he works out.
That's literally what I do all the time. It's either an audiobook or another podcast. Mm-hmm. Very rarely is it any type of music unless like I'm just really down and then need to hype myself up.
Yeah. And so I started it yesterday, and so I picked it up today on the way out and listened to it at the gym, and then on the way to work, and then on the way home. And I would say that I am very comfortable with using my credit for it so far. But it is getting kind of repetitive at this point. I think I'm into chapter 4, and it's like, okay, men and women are different. I kind of knew.
Yeah, that's interesting. Great point that he brings up.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting, because it's brought up some thoughts for me. Like, if I was one of the commanders, what would I do? And, you and I have had jobs where equality is just written into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have absolutely no problem serving with anybody who's capable.
Yeah.
I have a problem serving with people who are not capable.
I agree to that.
And I really feel like, especially when it comes to military service, and especially the infantry and the war arms of the military. There should be a standard for people to serve in those units.
I agree.
And if you meet that standard, you should be able to serve in that unit. So if you're a badass and you're able to meet the standard, you should be able to serve, regardless of any periphery. I don't think. I think there's probably 1% of females that could meet the standard for infantry, and even less for the special forces like Rangers or Force Recon or something like that. I just don't think there's a lot that one would want to, um, for legitimate reasons. I think there's plenty who want to, um, and I also don't think that there's many that have the physical capacity to do it, much less the mental capacity to do it. But I don't.
Yeah, that was one thing I was pretty happy about with, for example, Ranger School. Women wanted to get in Ranger School forever, and it was like, no, you can't. And finally, they're like, okay, you can, but what we're not going to do is we're not going to slack on the standards. You just got to meet the exact same standards across the board. And for the women that's done it, like good for them. They've met the standard. I back them. They should have that tab on their shoulder. The ones that haven't, they're not graduated, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, be the first, be bold, be everything, be all you can be. But I think there should be one standard, and
Mhm.
I don't I don't think that there should be a male standard and then a female standard, because then that's not the standard. And that's one of the points he kind of berates in the book a lot, is that the military is a fighting force and we need warriors there to fight it. And
Yeah,
women just don't typically fit that role. That's not to say that there's not a role for women in the military by any means. I think anybody who wants to serve should have the opportunity to. And I think there's, and it's not just women, but like, if somebody's not overly physically fit, but they still have a desire to serve their country, there's a lot of MOSs that you could serve in, that you could get to the point where you could meet the standard for those MOSs. But I think it's paramount to have a different standard for different units.
I agree with
So,
that.
and I kind of
Yeah.
feel like that's going to be the point of every chapter in this book. So,
Hmm.
but still going to finish it,
Yeah,
probably.
sure.
But that's interesting. Like, I definitely think that people need to, um, honorably discharge from the army or from the military to be a veteran. But I don't think that's the only way that people can serve their country, their communities. Um, I don't. I think that that is a way to serve, and that is a way to defend democracy. But I also feel like people who work in EMS, who work in police, who work fire departments, and to some extent some other service related fields. I think that's I think that service to community, service to state, service to country, uh, they're all very honorable. And I it's one of the things that I was thinking about over the weekend. It was like, just because somebody didn't serve in the military doesn't mean that they're not serving their fellow
Hmm.
man. You know,
Yeah,
and I don't think it should get taken out of control. Like, ooh, just because you're a waiter at Chili's, I don't think you should say, oh, I'm part of service. But no, I think yeah, I think service to people is honorable, and I don't think it has to be in the military.
yeah, and you can break that down even further. Like what is service? That's helping your neighbor. That's what it is in my book. At least it's helping somebody else that may not be able to repay you at that time. So, uh, like especially in my community, we live out in the country, so we help each other uh, any way we can, and that does a couple things. One, it's selfless of you to go out and help somebody when they need the help, can't, vice versa, whatnot. But that also helps you kind of build tribe within your community, to where when you need help one day, maybe they can come and help you with whatever that is. And, we talk about preparedness and things like that. And that helps you be more prepared, by having that sense of tribe around you, the people that you can rely on.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna have great neighbors all the time. But I would urge you and all the listeners not to be one of those that's not the great neighbors.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And I think I one of my best friends here. He's so devoted to his community, and he has never served in any kind of paramilitary function at all.
Mm.
But when he moved on to the first street, he moved from a country area. He wanted to move to the big city, and he went to a distressed area. He invested into his home. He started investing into his neighbors' homes as well. There were multiple people on the street that, for whatever reason, didn't keep their yards. And so when he would cut his grass, he would cut their grass. And, it costs a little bit of money for the gasoline. It costs a little bit of time to go out there and chase the lawnmower around their yard. But it began to build a pride on this street to where they were like, oh, we've got a really well kept street now.
Mm.
And it changed the demographic there in that the people started investing into their own area and into their community. There very much is a community there. They've got all kinds of little street meetings and everything else. And it's only been beneficial. Their property
Wow.
values have gone way up. And I definitely think that that's playing into what you're talking about. It's just
100%. 100%.
somebody doing what they can. It doesn't have to, you don't have to be Captain America. You can just be Matt and just go and cut somebody's grass and help them clean their yard up.
Yeah, that's great. That is absolutely admirable too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, and I think it builds stronger men, it builds stronger communities, it builds stronger women. I think that it's commendable and it's what we should be doing.
Hmm. Absolutely. It just makes you a good person too all around. You need to work on yourself, whether it's your physical fitness, your intellectual, um, uh, your cognitive well-being, your mental health, things like that. But you also should devote some time to help other people because in turn, that's helping you out too. It's giving you something, right there in that chest that you may not have before, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know you don't watch the news very much, but there was two really interesting stories that came out this weekend. One uh, is from a justice standpoint, and one's just from a good human standpoint. So I'm going to tell you about the justice one first.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember it. You were probably young because I think it happened in the late '90s or very early 2000s. But a exotic dancer was hired to go to a frat party on Duke campus. Uh,
What campus?
Duke,
Okay, Duke University.
yes,
Gotcha.
and accused multiple members of the lacrosse team of SA. Let's keep YouTube off our jock right now.
Yeah.
Um, and so these three young men were paraded in front of cameras, were dragged into court, had to defend themselves. Eventually, they were acquitted, but not until they had been dragged. Their reputations had been absolutely destroyed by this accusation.
Mhm.
Well, this past week, the woman who is serving a lengthy prison term for killing her boyfriend um,
Oof.
came out and admitted that she had made it up. Yeah, said that it was unfair for her to accuse them, but that it was all made up.
Hmm.
I was like, wow, you destroyed the beginning of three young men's lives uh, for notoriety, for whatever.
Yeah.
And so this weekend they have been vindicated. But I also wonder what has happened in that time frame in their lives. Like, did they become anything? And if they did, how difficult was it to recover from that?
Yeah. You know what? That's the scary part about the world we live in because, and I'm going to use the male female relationship. Of course, it can happen female to female, male to male, but for simplicity of it, I know I've got personal friends of mine that may be going through a nasty divorce or whatnot, and accusations come around, and that one causes them to lose a job. It could, and especially if you're in an office of high moral turpitude, if it gets exposed that like so and so was arrested for DV, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
The news media is going to pick it up because local fill in the blank, whatever title, arrested for domestic violence or whatever. Oops, I said it. Uh,
That's not as bad as the other one.
yeah, yeah.
That's not
We'll
the
say
R
DV
word.
for now on.
Yeah.
But like, and that really messes up their reputation just because, hey, I'm going to try to get even with them because this person's trying to divorce me. Uh, who knows? Maybe they did commit the act of DV, whatever the law says, right? But that hurts. It hurts their reputation. And then, I've got another friend of mine that um, wife accused or ex-wife accused him of CP, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big deal. FBI shows up, all these other three-letter agencies start coming around the workplace, and they eventually find that person not guilty. But
Well,
what happens to the person that accused them, right?
well, I
Like I
think I know
really,
who you're talking about, and they never said he was not guilty. They just never said anything. So,
yeah, exactly.
and if it's the same person that I think we're talking about, he's an asshole in a lot of ways, but I don't think he was ever that.
No, God no.
And like there's a whole lot of reasons that I don't want to be his friend, but not because of that. Because I
Sure.
like when I heard about it, I was like, no, that just doesn't pass the sniff test. And I guess you never know, but then especially the fact that there was never anything else. It was just this boom, nuclear bomb at work in front of everybody in the paper. They took all of his electronic devices. They damaged his vehicle, um,
Hmm.
and there's no payment for all that. There's never any. It's just bitterness.
Yeah, and he had to go out and buy new electronics. Well, they finally, after a couple of years, gave his old stuff back. He couldn't use them anymore. They were
Oh no.
destroyed, you
Yeah.
know. But there's a couple things that I think about that. Is one, what happens to the accuser if I can understand if you like in good thought process seen a bunch of evidence and made an accusation, but after due process and all that fun stuff, they're like, hey, actually, there's no fault here. Everything's good to go. But the people that just get mad and knowingly, like the lacrosse incident that you were talking about, what happens to the accuser? I absolutely think there should be a jail time for that. I absolutely think there should be some type of repercussion to that.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. But well, it's the same thing that happened to Daniel Penny. He was just a guy standing up for people, and he's had to go through this entire court drama, and it can't be cheap. I mean, I don't know if he comes from an affluent family that can absorb something like that, but the defense is always on you.
Hmm.
You know, it's like it's you got to pay for it, or else you just get hemmed up, and it's just bad.
I
But
mean, look at the Eddie Gallagher case with the U.S. Navy. They're trying to convict this man of war crimes and violate every right that he had. He finally was found not guilty, but that was after having to get congressmen and things like that involved because the UCMJ isn't going to give you a fair trial at all.
yeah,
And that was very evident, you know. But what happens to the accusers? Nothing. There's a couple of them that went to Denver. Like, it makes no sense.
yeah, it's crazy. But let's talk about something good.
Sure.
Sam Benistick.
Okay.
He's Canadian. That's why it's funny.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So Sam Benistick was in British Columbia, and I'm recalling a lot of these things off the top of my head. So if I get it a little bit wrong, apologies. It's also a very fresh story. I caught it last night, and I saw it a little bit more today, and so it's one of the good news stories, and I like it. So Sam Benistick in British Columbia went into a national forest to do some camping, and somehow or another got distressed in some kind of way and was lost for 50 days.
You broke up a little bit. Can you repeat that?
Okay, yeah, so he went camping and he was supposed to be gone for 10 days. And after 10 days, he did not show back up. And after 50 days, he was rescued.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know the full story yet, and I don't know if he's made any comments on it. But apparently, he was self-sufficient enough to survive for 50 days in the Canadian wilderness. It said that he camped out by his car for a while and went to a shelter and then made a shelter in a creek bed where he was eventually rescued from.
Wow.
Yeah.
I, I wonder, this time of the year, what is the weather like in British Columbia? Like, it's got to be cold,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Snow, freezing. Yeah. He
Yeah.
had cut holes into his sleeping bag and like was wearing it as like overalls. And
Wow.
yeah, and so it what I really like about this story is one, it has a really happy ending, and we don't have a lot of those in our lives. But two, this 20-year-old kid was smart enough to be able to sustain himself for almost 2 months in the wilderness.
Wow.
And, um, it was like, this, and he's just a normal looking dude. Like the pictures of him, he's just like anybody. And
Hmm.
I was trying to find the story quickly. I was going to try and put it up, but I can't, so I'm going to stop. Um, but yeah, so this guy, for benefit of ignorance, he's obviously a skilled outdoorsman. He um, is obviously able to forage or to hunt. He's able to think outside the box and keep himself alive. And I'm like, man, what a great story. I love stories like this.
Hmm.
I'm um, I read a book called Deep Survival, and it talked about the physiological and the psychological ways that people survived incidents that other people would have died in.
Hmm.
And the overarching uh, synopsis was that if you did something, you would probably survive. If you did nothing, you would probably die.
Hmm. That's a very good point. Because I think survival, the first thing, even if you like had nothing, as long as you have a good mindset, I think that would get you very far, and probably get you to survival as long as your mindset is good. Now, how do you get that mindset? Great question. Uh, but as long as you're got that willingness that I'm not going to give up, we're going to try to work the problem and figure this out. That goes a long way,
Yeah.
a very long way.
Well, I think there are certain people that are predisposed to be more likely to survive. Um, but I think it's like these people come from certain places and they go through certain things and they have a certain sense of hope. And they're probably a little bit weird. They're probably not the guy that you would think of. Like you would probably not be impressed to hear a story about a former ranger going out to the wilderness and staying for 50 days. That
Mm-hmm.
probably would not, because you would expect that. They've been trained for that. And so um, for this kid, this 20-year-old kid, to be able to pull it off, it's pretty awesome. But you have to wonder, like, who is he?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the wrestlers that got attacked by the bear?
That sounds familiar, but no.
Yeah, up in Montana, these three guys were out camping, hiking. I think they were looking for moose antlers or something like that, looking for some sort of trophies out in the wilderness. And one of them was attacked by a bear, and the other two guys with him fought the bear. and like, and I don't. I'm not a bear expert, but the easiest way to never be killed by a bear is to carry bear spray when you're in bear country.
Mm-hmm.
Bear spray is far more effective than bullets in stopping a encounter with a bear. Because bears are pretty big, and it might take more than a bullet to
Mm-hmm.
make them. If you might give them one bullet and they get angry,
Sure.
and if they catch up with you, they're fast. They might be burly, but they're fast.
Mm-hmm.
So um, so yeah, it's pretty interesting that these three guys just, again, that sense of community. They were like, hey, you know what? No, not going down today. And I don't know how you really wrestle a bear. I'm not a Bear Bryant. So I think he was a bear wrestler.
He was. That's how he got his nickname Bear.
Yeah. So, um, so yeah, it's good stories out there. Bad stories,
Yeah.
but justice finally making it around.
Mm-hmm.
Not a bad weekend.
No.
Yeah.
So we were talking about that survival in the woods. How do you survive every day? Let's talk about that.
You know,
Like, how do we get through our day? You know?
well, that's something interesting that I was having a conversation with somebody else and actually thought about. I was like, we're probably going to talk about this on here, so we can kind of breach it tonight. You know, every single day, somewhere within your vision, there's some kind of episode that's going down that somebody may not survive in. And I was thinking about this on my last road trip. I was coming through Atlanta, which I absolutely hate. And um, I was just passing the belt line. I got in there, and there was a big wreck that happened in front of me. And I'm not really impressed with wrecks because I know cars are built really well. But it was a pretty fantastic visual effect. And I was like, ooh, wow, that's a big wreck. So I watched as all these people started stopping all around the wreck. And I thought, y'all are idiots. If I was going if I was going to stop, I did not stop. But if I was going to, I would have parked upstream of the wreck.
Yep.
Everybody else was parking downstream of the wreck, and I'm kind of like, I don't really want my stuff to get hit, and
Yeah.
and so if I, that's just a very simple survival technique. That if I'm going to help somebody out, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure I'm going to have an opportunity to be safe in it. But even as something as simple as that, like, am I going to put myself in extra danger to help somebody else that I have no obligation to help? But if I'm going to do it, can I do it in a way to optimize my survival if things got really bad?
Mm-hmm.
Because you and I have both been in situations where the goodness of people caused a bigger situation. Like, oh, I'm going to stop to help. Well, now your car got hit too.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and look at it like this, they park fire trucks behind wrecks all the time. They got, a big fire truck with flashy lights and all the chevron striping on the back of it and the reflectives and all that stuff. How many of those are getting hit every day? They're getting nailed all the time. I mean, just where I live at, there was last year, I can't tell you how many trucks got totaled, not just scraped, but totaled because of that. And it's funny you said because it brings me back to a time of the good person causing an issue, inadvertently, right? So, as I've kind of alluded to before, I worked emergency services for majority of my adulthood. Matter of fact, all of my adulthood, I've been working emergency services. And I remember a wreck in the middle of the night on the interstate where it was a pretty significant wreck, but I was a little bit later getting to the incident. And when I got there, I was assigned to do a rescue effort for a person that, Good Samaritan, she's seen the wreck. She was at an overpass. So she walks down to help, and her right leg fell into a storm grate. And, she's trapped, and she wasn't a smaller individual. So she was stuck. We tried picking her up. That didn't happen. So we ended up having to cut the grate to free her leg. And the other patient, who was pretty hurt, they were gone a long time before we were able to get her out. So we had to divide resources up to help the good person get out of her bad situation.
Yeah, yeah, it happens all the time, and it's like I think even something as simple as going to the grocery store, I try to keep my head wrapped around the idea that anything could happen. So, I need to not live in worry because I don't. I don't live worried about anything. I sometimes worry about my food going bad because I leave it out on the counter. Um, but
Yeah.
I don't worry about like horrible things happening to me. But um, I'm also the kind of person that I have conversations like these where I'm like, all right, if something went down in a grocery store, what would I
Mm-hmm.
do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So is there just your normal day to day? Is there anything that you carry on your person, your everyday carry, if you will?
oh yeah, Leatherman, a multi-tool.
Okay.
Yeah.
You always carry a multi tool?
Oh yeah, at least one.
Okay.
At,
Interesting.
yeah, there's one in all of my cars. There's one in my backpack that I ride with. There's one almost always within arm's reach of me.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I think, and I can think of countless times where something has gone wrong, where having a decent knife and a screwdriver or a pair of pliers was what I needed to get through. And that could be from something minor like minor breakdown on
Hmm.
something to you know a machine breaking down that's very needed at work, and nobody has a tool to fix it. But here I am with my little screwdriver, and it's not efficient, but yeah, it's always there. And I um,
That's interesting. I when I go to work, I have a knife that's got two screwdriver heads to it, a Phillips and a flat, and that's been pretty sufficient for me. Um, but a good knife is always on a person.
oh yeah,
Uh,
and all of my um, Leatherman tools have that, and like this is one. So it's got
is
a
that the
little.
skeleton?
Nope, this is just a free. This is a free T2, so it's only got one side, but it's got a little knife, and it's got a couple of other little things here. I've got a little Phillips head, a little flat head, and I've got a little awl. And it's a little knife as well. It's sharpened so that you could actually cut something with it. And it's tiny. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
so and that's literally just sitting here on my counter for I'm sure I had to open a box or a letter or something.
Yeah, you weren't kidding when you said they were an orange reach,
All
right?
the time. All the time, yeah. And so um, yeah, and and you could use a knife as a screwdriver in a pinch. It's probably not
Hmm.
going to do great things for the knife, but you can always resharpen and retool a knife.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, but it's I think keeping a knife on you at all times. You could use it as self defense as well.
No, for sure, for sure.
And that's
So
I don't think
depends on
I don't think
go.
self defense is just against like a criminal who might want to do you harm. I think it's also, um, you know, what if a wild dog chases you?
Hmm.
Are you going to let yourself get bit and get rabies, or you're going to do something to try and stop that from happening?
Yeah, I agree 100% there. Um, Now let me ask you this: depending on where you're going or what you're doing, does that change with what you carry on your person?
Absolutely,
I'm the
absolutely.
same way, same way.
And I'm one of those people. I'm a big supporter of the 2A. I don't believe that the 2A existed for us to hunt.
Hmm.
It was never about that. It was about maintaining a certain level of security for self, for community, for country. So, um, like if I'm going downtown to ride my skateboard, there's a small item that I carry with me. Um, if I'm driving somewhere that especially in this season where there's a lot of desperation, if I'm going to be at a shopping mall, I'm probably going to have a little bigger something with me. And here at the house we have coyotes, so I
Hmm.
got to have something to take care of the coyotes because I can't let them get my animals.
No, no.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm the same way, and it depends on a lot of things, you know. So fitness is a big deal in my life, so I'm constantly going to the gym. Well, what do you wear to a gym typically? You don't wear these tactical pants that's got all these pockets and rooms for all your accessories. I have basketball shorts on a lot of times. So one of the things that I bought for myself was a holster that I can put on with some basketball shorts. Now, like you've got to tie the drawstring up and make sure it's not going anywhere. But I can put my pew pew uh, in my basketball shorts, and I've got no issues with that. I carry the pew pew plus an extra mag,
the
and
pew
it
pew
does
and the
really great.
PP.
Yeah, and it does great now. I mean, I might not have it on while I'm inside the gym, but like,
Mm-hmm.
how many times do you go to the gym and then I've got to go to Walmart and grab XYZ, or I've got to go over here to grab something? That ability is worth its weight just to be able to have it. I mean, I can't. I might not have a knife on me per se, but I do have that, in my phone and whatnot.
There are quite a few law enforcement officers that work out at the gym that I work at, especially at the time that I work out at. It's early in the morning, it's probably before their shift. And one morning, as my mind just drifts and ebbs and wanes the way that it does, I started thinking, if one of these guys was being targeted by a cartel, that would be a really soft target to be able to get to
Hmm. Yeah,
them. And
that's a very good point.
so it's like, and that's not even, that's just something that I could be peripheral on. And I don't, I wear long sleeve shirts all the time. I wear long pants at the gym, not very thick pants, but long pants.
Hmm.
And um, I guess if I really felt like that was happening, it wouldn't be that difficult for me to conceal there. But
Hmm.
I, it's one of those places that I have really thought about that. I'm like, this is a very soft target because everybody's guard is down.
Hmm. Oh yeah, for sure.
Because we may not talk a lot to each other, but I bet that the exact same people are there nearly every single morning.
Hmm.
And so there's no sense of danger. There's no sense of alert in a place like that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I I do a lot of hiking, I do a lot of endurance sports, I do a lot of things like that. And there have been times that I've been out and conditions change. Either the weather changes or a group of people appears, and I'm my spidey sense goes off. I'm like, ooh, this might be one of those times where things don't go quite as planned. And
Especially with groups, man. Wolves travel in groups.
yeah,
I don't like groups of people. I don't.
yeah, and especially if they're in a place where you're not expecting them. You know,
Yeah.
I've been out hiking before and hiked into a group that doesn't have my same reverence for the outdoors and the peace and tranquility. And it's mostly just been ships in the night, but um, I always wonder, like, we've on the Appalachian Trail, there have been murders,
Hmm.
and that's one of the most loving and magical places on the planet. It's like if you don't have any friends, go hike the AT. You'll have an entire family by the time you get done.
Yeah, that ain't no joke. I've never hiked the Appalachian Trail, but like everybody I know that's done it, just they meet so many different people from so many different walks of life. You know.
Oh yeah, and it's was what th- four 4 or 5 years ago that a guy out on the trail ended up murdering 3 people.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was all because he was angry. But that's not really the place where things happen, though. Like
Hmm.
here in the town that I live in, recently we had a shooting that happened in front of a hookah bar, and everybody's like, "Oh, I can't believe that. That's a great area," and I'm like, "It's not that great."
Oh, I had a bad experience there the last time I was in your town,
Oh
and
yeah, the
like,
same area.
yeah, absolutely not. And now, granted, I was in. That happened at nighttime too, correct? That wasn't broad daylight shooting, was it?
Well, that's an entertainment district, so it was at nighttime, but that's not really an area that you would think of that kind of violence happening because it is heavily patrolled. It's heavily cameraed.
Not when I was there. It was not patrolled at all. When I was there, I didn't see the first cop.
Yeah. But yeah, you would not have really. There was not a high alert for that area, and granted, that was a very targeted situation. but the other people didn't know. Just all of a sudden, it was happening.
I didn't. I didn't know that was a targeted event or anything like that, but it was. I heard about it. And I was like, I can 100% see that happening. I mean, there was a lot of homeless people there and stuff, and I had that interesting encounter with that homeless dude. You know,
Yeah.
which that brings up to another point where we can segue into. It's like, what happens when you're traveling with somebody? If you have a loved one with you or something like that, like, how does your defense plan change, or your awareness, survivability, things like that? How does that change when you have somebody with you?
I don't really travel with people that aren't kind of equally prepared. Um, so, I mean, I guess I do, but especially as I've gotten older, um, my my circles become much more homogenized. We're all kind of in the same thought process, in the same mindset. And it terrifies me to think, like, if I had a kid right now and going some places with him, and I've been out with my nephew before. We were in a Target, and two guys attacked the Target employee and started stealing all the Apple products.
Really?
Yeah, it was around Christmas time, and me and my nephew were there, and we heard somebody yell "help!" So of course we're like, "Okay, yeah, we'll help." We thought something had fallen off of a shelf, and when we got over there, I like came around an aisle, and I could see the two guys. They were just throwing everything into like plastic bins that they had grabbed from another aisle, and had knocked this woman down. And
Wow.
yeah, and I almost intervened, but then I thought, no, I've got my nephew here.
Great point. That is a great point.
So it absolutely changed my response, because I do think that I would have intervened. I think it would have been fun. Probably wouldn't have gone great, but a lot of the fun that I've had didn't go well. But
Yeah. So, like, for example, like, if I'm traveling with my wife or whatnot, I know that I have to plan for a second person because, like, I know that uh, he might not be as prepared as I am for different situations. But when something happens, it's easier for me to break contact and just get her. So, like, for those that work personal security or anything like that, like, that's the principle. Like, I've got to do whatever I can to protect her. That's my number one goal. And just breaking contact and getting to a safe place per se might be the move. Like, when I was in that area in the town that you live in, long story short, I had a homeless guy that threw a bottle at me. That's an act of aggression.
mm-hmm.
Like, I absolutely could have, like, handled that. But by keep walking and maybe turning a little bit to make sure I wasn't being followed or whatnot, that was the move to make in my opinion, and it worked out well.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my situation, as soon as I kind of realized what was going on, I grabbed him and kind of moved back. And once they took off, we kind of followed them at distance. But it was, yeah, and that was just me and him looking for Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
And so you never know. Oh, just kicked one of the dogs. You just never know when something may go down, and I think you should always. I don't think you should sit around and dwell on these things all the time, but I think it matters to have conversations from time to time where you just talk about scenarios and what you would do, and that way you have some sort of idea in your mind. Like. I had a friend who was out riding a motorcycle and went off the Blue Ridge Parkway. And nobody found him for 3 days.
Mm.
And so that I hey, and it's the one that can't hear, so it's not like I can yell at her.
I was gonna say, did she hear you?
No, no. And but I had already invested in a satellite locator, and that just confirmed that price for me. It was like anytime I ride, especially if I'm going out by myself, it's usually somewhere where I can reach in a decorticate type of situation. Because most people, when they get hurt, they're going to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And it might hurt to get in, but then that's where you're going to be. So I always kept it kind of up on my shoulder. So if I needed to activate it, I could. But that was his thing, that he went off the road. It's called target fixation. And he saw something, and he looked at it, and that's exactly where he and the bike went. And he was reported missing, but some of the guys that rode with him kind of knew his normal path. And one guy just happened to see a single track go off of the Blue Ridge. And he was down there for 3 days with a broken leg.
Mm.
Yeah, and he's recovered. He's well.
Good.
But that's something that I've thought about, because I go on a lot of solo adventures. I really enjoy it, and I don't mind if that's the last thing I do one day. If that's the way that it goes, fair game. It's been good fun. Don't want to do it, but what I don't want to do is sit somewhere hurt and not be able to help myself.
Yeah, valid. Very good point.
Yeah, so
like that goes into like inside my vehicle. So sometimes when I'm driving, I don't have my pew pew on my person because it might just feel uncomfortable, especially if you have a long drive. If it's just around town, no big deal. But in my console to the right of me, I have some type of a weapon system. I have a iPad, an individual first aid kit with a tourniquet. And the reason being, with my vehicle flips, I want the contents of that to be securely located to where I can reach and get it if I need to self aid or buddy aid or whatnot.
what do you think about tourniquets?
What do I think about them? I love them. I love them.
Mm-hmm.
I say I love them, but at the same time, I'm not one of those people that have one on me 24/7. It's really dependent of where I'm at. If I'm in the woods, I have one with me. There's a high likelihood that I might need it.
Yeah.
But walking around in Walmart, I probably don't have one with me.
So,
and I admit that as a fault.
Do you think it's important to have a tourniquet that meets a certain standard?
Oh yes, the standard of Committee of Tactical Combat Casualty Care, COTC, is the standard that I follow. Like, that's one thing that pisses me off is, like, you can go on Amazon right now and I guarantee you can buy 3 tourniquets for $19.99. They're not real. They're fake. They're Chinese knockoffs. I'm sorry. This is like, I'm really passionate about that subject. But yes, get a good tourniquet. North American Rescue, TACMed Solutions, SAM, they make a good tourniquet. But I think you can get a good tourniquet, but you also have to understand how to use it. It's not one of the things that, let's just buy it and put it in my car or put it in my little vest and not do anything with it. And don't practice with the one that you're wanting to save your life with. Right? Buy 2, one to practice with, one to not practice with.
I think throughout the years, I've probably seen a tourniquet needed and applied appropriately 3 times.
Okay.
So I, but I did get a strong talking to one time from an employer because I used a tourniquet in a way that it wasn't stopping arterial flow
Hmm.
because it's a device that you can set and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. So if you just need pressure, just don't go all the way.
Oh wow.
And I had a lot to do, but I had some bleeding that I needed to control. So I put a tourniquet on. I just didn't put it on as tight enough to stop arterial flow. And I was like, why would you do that? I was like, I had a lot to do. It freed up my hands.
Yeah.
It's like you can't tell me how to use it. And um, there was another time that I was on a call where a tourniquet was absolutely necessary, and a tourniquet was applied correctly, but it was not like a manufactured tourniquet. It was just basically a belt that had Velcro on it. And
So I was talking to a colleague, friend of mine. We were teaching a class together, and he was talking about his IFAC, and he keeps a manufactured tourniquet in his, but he also keeps a windlass and a triangle bandage. And I was like, if you have a tourniquet, why are you carrying another one, like another like improvised one? And he said there's some people, and it makes a lot of sense. So I'm probably going to start doing this. But he said there are some people that Cat Gen 7 tourniquet's not going to work on them.
Mhm.
Think about a pediatric patient. Think about I mean, they got to be small. I mean, tiny, because that cat can get down like that tall or that tight, you know. So, or a bigger person that's got a lot of like fat around that leg or whatnot. Um, you might need to go old school, you know,
Mhm.
to make it happen. So I thought that was a very good thought process.
I was watching, um, I was watching 2A podcast recently. It's one of the ones that I watch when I cook, or I listen to it. I don't really watch it. But they were taking some slack because they have manufactured a tourniquet, and people are criticizing it for not meeting the specifications. And it's like, well, who decided what the specifications were? And does it matter what the specifications are if it still works?
Yeah, so I was really big into like tactical medicine for a little while. I
Yeah.
still kind of am, but I've forgotten a lot of the things that I used to know. And the COTSI review board, they do a really good job. Like Dr. Andrew Fisher, Trauma Daddy on Instagram, that's his name. He used to be a paramedic, then he went to either 175 or 375 with the Ranger Regiment as a medic for them. Got his PA, and now he's doing a surgical residency in New Mexico. Anyway, like phenomenal guy. And he's like really pushed combat casualty care like leaps and bounds. Uh, Regardless of that shameless plug that I gave him, he he had a study about the different testing things they do. Like for example, the rats tourniquet that was like the fan fave for a while. You know, ball it up, throw it in your pocket, like it's great. And then they started testing how it actually works, and rats is not a thing anymore. You know, it's the equivalent of taking your shoelace off and trying to stop bleeding with that. It may work, probably won't, but you know,
Yeah.
it's worth an effort, right?
Yeah. I thought it was an interesting concept. It was like, so if you are somebody who manufactures gear and you manufacture a new tourniquet that works, does it matter if it's not past that specification, if that review board has not given its blessing to it. And I have a tourniquet in my bag. I think I have two kinds, and I think I have an Israeli one. Is that the big rubber band? You just keep wrapping it.
That's the SWAT T tourniquet.
Yeah, I have one of those that somebody gave me, and I was like, I'll put it in here because I don't think that I would trust it as much for a tourniquet, because especially for self-applying, I just feel like I don't know that I could get it tight enough on myself. Where the more traditional tourniquet, when you twist it, it's there. You know when it's worked.
Fun fact: that tourniquet failed the Coxie test. It
The
failed them pretty bad. Yeah. It works as a great pressure dressing. They actually say that it's a good pressure dressing. I've never used it as one, but I could see where it would be beneficial.
I've never worked for a service that provided them.
Yes, you did.
Hmm.
Yes, you did.
If I would have known that, I probably would have stole one.
At the beginning of where me and you met at,
Yeah.
they had those on the truck, and then after one call that me and another individual ran, they switched to the cats.
Yeah.
Shortly thereafter, and that was a very interesting call. So, long story short, this patient had a near amputation of one of her lower legs. And the first provider, I gave instructions, hey, I want you to put a tourniquet on it. And he pulled the tourniquet out and went to apply it, and he just said, I've got a failure. I didn't think anything of it. The tourniquet I kept in my pocket because I always kept an extra one in my pocket when I worked that particular agency. I gave him that one. He put it on. Everything was fine. Life was good. Patient actually did really great. But after it was over, they're like, "What happened?" I reviewed what that individual said happened, and it come down to a failure of training. He didn't know how to use that particular tourniquet that they put on.
Yeah, it's. I used to make everybody mad there because I had one of those tourniquets in my little tactical vest, but it was still in the wrapper.
Yeah, you made me mad. But taking shit out of it.
I don't want to get it dirty before it's used. Infection control.
They've got antibiotics at the hospital. Who'd I hear that from?
I don't know. Clean enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking about PPUs, what do you carry?
Totally depends.
Okay.
So, especially when I go downtown during the summer, it's probably going to be a smaller get off me.
Okay.
And it fits in a fanny pack.
Oh, that's a small fanny pack.
Yeah, and it's in there.
I like that.
Yeah, and it's in there, so it's very unassuming. It doesn't flag anything. It doesn't give anybody any idea. I just look like a weird guy with a fanny pack on. And so,
which I don't mean this disrespectfully, but like the area you live in, you could get by with that, you know?
oh yeah, absolutely. So, that's probably my most frequent. Now, in the wintertime, I can hide a lot bigger, and so I typically do. I like mid frame to large frames, especially if they double stack. And I have certain brands. Glock it's so dependable, and so I that's pretty much what all of mine are. But It just depends. Here around the property, if I'm going out on the four wheeler or something, uh, I've got a Sig that I have a special chest harness for. That's kind of what I carry around, but it's been riddled with a lot of bad publicity, so I don't really want to take it downtown and depend on it.
Oh, was that the one that got the bad publicity?
Yeah, that Sig. It's the military's weapon. It's the
What
P328.
was that?
It's the P328
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
M4, I believe. And
Yeah, I remember that.
yeah,
A bunch of people were having these accidental discharges, right?
yeah. And so, and I know a lot. I watched a couple of videos about accidental discharges with it, and they weren't able to recreate them the way that the people claim that they happened. So I don't really think that it's a problem, but um, I don't know. It's also it's what the army went to, and I wanted it because of that. And so it's more like a desk gun at this point. It's just there. So most of mine are of the Austrian variety.
Yeah, so I have, for my everyday carry, I've got two separate ones. Um, they're both Glocks. They're both Glock 43s. One's an X, one's not, right? The one that's just the regular 43, all I've done to it is put a different trigger on it and threw some night sights on it. That's all I've done. Um, and I like that. Well, and an extended mag I put on there to get my pinky around it. But I have that for situations where, um, I've got a belt on or whatever. I always have a belt because that's the thing. But it's a little bit more low profile than the other one. So if I've got I don't know, a tighter shirt on, I won't print with it. Now with my 43X, it is a MOS, so it means there's an optic on the top of it, and I have a flashlight with it. And because it's a 43X, it's a little bit longer, so you've got to be a little bit more careful about that one and about printing with it. But I've worn it with polo shirts on tucked in, and it's done okay. Um, I think really the holster just kind of makes or breaks you there. I really believe that.
And I don't think that the holster that works best for you would necessarily work best for me.
I agree. I listened to somebody one time and he pushed this holster out and I bought one and absolutely hated it.
Mm-hmm.
The holster I carry now is a tier one concealed. Both of mine are tier one concealed. Um, I can't remember the name of it, but the one I carry with the that I can wear with like polo shirts and all my gym shorts, it's the same one. It's got clips on the front of it, so it clips to the actual fabric of your pants, your shorts, whatever it is, and that's what allows me to do it in like shorts.
Yeah, yeah, and I like I think in my fanny pack, it's in just a little Uncle Mike's holster. I mean,
Oh yeah,
it sits in the fanny pack. It doesn't go on me.
yeah.
And it was a cheap little holster that carries an extra magazine, and you know, and so it's like okay, it's like $11 at Academy. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
super easy. I've got some molded ones that I like for different applications. Um, the chesty that I have is made by Alien Gear or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it, but there's absolutely no hiding it. It's
Yeah, that's there.
yeah, but I think I live in a state where um, it's pretty pro 2A, it's pretty conservative, and we have cardless carry. We don't have to have a concealed carry permit.
Oh, great. That's great. I
Yeah,
wish all states would, because I'm tired of asking permission for my 2A rights.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's Um, you have to be careful rolling up on some folks around here because you just don't know. Um,
What's your thoughts on open carry?
I support it. I support all forms of carry. I think it's sometimes it's pretty silly.
I agree.
Um, I feel like sometimes people are just kind of flashing a light on themselves, and maybe there's an appropriateness to it, but I typically do not. I don't really talk about if I am carrying or not. Uh, I I don't know of a situation where I would open carry.
The only time I've open carried, and the reason why I don't is it does draw a light to you. If there's somebody that's going to intend to do bad, he's the first person. You're the first person that he's going to shoot at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're the one that's posing a threat. I don't want anybody knowing that I could be a threat. I want everything to be cool until you FAFO, right?
Yeah.
But the only time I've ever open carried is I had it on my belt because I was working around the property, kind of doing what you're doing. And need gas for the tractor, let me go, or diesel fuel for the tractor, let me go get that. And I've got a gun on my side. That's the only time because I'm not going to be out in the public long. And the gas station that I primarily go to, it's in the middle of nowhere. Like everybody's got a gun on them, they know.
Yeah. There was an area that I used to get called to frequently, and there was a very specific guy who every time he was always
I
walking
know
around
exactly who you're talking about.
like he was the sheriff, and I was just kind of like, dude, I don't know how much money you've spent on that, but you should probably save like half of that and buy some extra rounds because I really don't think you have the demeanor to do anything with
Mm-mm.
it. And a lot of times when it's a very specific kind of guy or girl that I see that open carries.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm out on the bike, I see it a lot, and it's always a very specific kind of guy that's got it on him. Now, there's a bunch of guys that I've ridden with, and when you're riding, you're a little bit over, and stuff comes up, things are revealed, and it's like, oh yeah, there's that. But there are other people who just flag it the entire time. It's out there,
Oh yeah.
and I'm like,
Uh,
what you scared of there, buddy?
yeah.
It's like, hey, I don't know if I would think of you as my warrior protector person.
I can't remember where I was at, but there was this dude that had like a full size revolver, like probably Smith Wesson 500. I mean, this thing was huge. I'm like, dude, it's gonna take you 2 minutes to get it out of your holster. Like let me get the rest of this barrel out. Like, god dang, man.
Yeah, I was I was listening to something and they talked about the incidents of gunfire in civilian sense. There's probably a deer outside right now, and uh, in a situation where someone has drawn their weapon in self-defense, it's usually however many bullets are in it at the time that get fired.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, I'm probably not going to be in a combat zone. Probably. Most likely. So these guys that do these ridiculous, I've got 10 extra clips all over me, and I've got my sidearm, and I've got my backup, and I got my hair gun. And
Yeah.
I'm like, where are you going?
Detroit. That's where we're going.
Detroit's not even that bad anymore. Like, come on, man. Where are you going? Like, what? Like, it's got to be heavy. It has to weigh at least what 50 grenades weighs. Has to. Has to.
You
And
know,
it's
a lot of people call me overkill, and I don't mind saying this, but I I've got my weapon. I always have an extra mag on me. That's just one is none, two is one. That's that thought process. But my thought is I want enough ammo that's going to get me to my primary weapon. So in my car, there's a long gun. In my truck, there's a long gun. It's probably the same one because I just bounce them back and forth. Uh, and that's just something I've always done. Like, am I ever going to use that long gun? Probably not. But there is that one chance that I might have to, you know? And a lot of that comes from is the distance travel. Like,
Mhm.
I don't have a 10-minute commute to work. I've got an hour commute. So that long gun could turn into a survival gun or something like that. Like, I'm not going to shoot a deer with a pistol. I could. I don't want to.
it's probably not going to be very effective.
Yeah. So it doubles.
Yeah. I There's a guy I know who's got a lot of weaponry. Um, and whatever your hobby is, rock and roll. I have way more vehicles than any one person needs to have. So I don't have any judgments on whatever people do with their money. Uh, but when you talk to him, his reasoning is always, well, what if it hits the fan? And it's like, okay, how are you going to move all that?
Yeah.
Because I know the area that you're in, and it's a pretty populated area, so you're probably not going to want to stay there. It's not like you can create a perimeter at it.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really a lot of resources, so you're going to have to go. And
Yeah.
how are you going to move it all? And you and I have talked about this. If it ever did hit the fan, what's most realistic? And uh, for survival, I think nomadicity. That's a word. Nomadic nature would be the highest possibility of survival. And so you have to think, okay, well, once you're out on foot, everything that you have to carry.
Mm-hmm.
And so there comes a point in time where you're like, do I really need 17 different rifles? Do I really need all this? And personally, I've got one that's super. Um, I could hunt with it. It probably wouldn't be great, but I could hunt with it. It would provide good self defense, and it's not overly heavy. It's easy to carry. So
Yeah. A lot of people they mess up by putting like all these attachments and stuff on their weapons, and so a lot of people laugh at me, but I've got several AR-15s, right?
mhm.
But why? I am very big about mission specific weapons. I've got one for close quarters combat. I've got one for close to medium range. I've got another one for longer range. Then I've got one that's just set next to my bed in case I need to wake up and sort some things out real quick. But they all have mission specific. Now that being said, if my close quarters gun breaks, I've got extra parts and a lot of them. So I'm good. Guess what? I don't have all these different calibers. I don't have, well, this one's 5.56 and this one's 9 millimeter and this one's 308. They're all 223. Guess what? Well, if you want to buy me a Christmas present, buy me 223 ammo.
Yeah,
It's simple.
and
I'll use it.
yeah, it's a buddy of mine. He's real big on 45. He's like, oh, get you a 45. It'll knock anything down. And I'm like, well, so will a 22.
Mm-hmm.
And and that going back to the Austrians, if it ever does hit the fan, it probably is going to be a whole lot easier to find parts for a Glock than it would be for something more exotic.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be a lot easier to find some 9mm than it is going to be to find some 45 or some 50 cal.
Yeah.
So but then I, again, do whatever, put a light bulb up your ass and call yourself a lamp. I don't care.
Yeah.
But it's silliness to me sometimes.
Hmm. Yeah, they can go overboard big time with it.
Oh yeah, and he is not somebody that has multiple versions of an AR. He is somebody that has multiple ingredients to war. I mean, he's probably got 50 or more guns. And it's really kind of cool, because he'll bring them over and we can play with them.
Hmm.
But I'm also kind of like, I'm proficient with what I got.
Yeah, that's the key, man. Proficiency.
Yeah. Takes
And that's something else that's like good about having ARs. Like in my specific case, is if you can train on one, you can handle the rest of them. Maybe, I mean, you can't practice with a 10.5 inch barrel and expect to do CQB with a 20 inch barrel,
Yeah.
or like a 16 inch barrel. But you get the concepts behind it.
Absolutely. And, I think people should pursue whatever hobbies they want to pursue, but be proficient with them.
I agree.
And you probably find some enjoyment, probably find some friends, probably learn some new things.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have in my things, but I absolutely agree with you about mission specific, because you hate to take a tourniquet to a cardiac arrest. You're like, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'll stop something
Absolutely.
that's already stopped.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are you looking forward to this week?
This week, you're getting prepared to go back to work this Friday, and we've got some training that has to be completed Wednesday night. We've got some moons out, goons out training, which is always fun.
I like it.
But I think, but on the besides work related things, we got some good gym days coming up. I live for the gym day per se.
Yeah.
And teaching a little bit, man. I like teaching. I like teaching other people things that I know, and it helps reinforce the things that I do know.
Yeah. How do you like it when you get those little smart butts in there that start questioning you?
I've got one right now that I'm dealing with quite often. I It's a challenge, and I like that because one, it forces me to know my material better, so I can appreciate that. But you've probably experienced this. It's like the ones that will challenge you, ask you a question, you answer the question, and they don't like the answer, so they go to somebody else. That's the ones that piss me off the most.
Yeah.
That really makes me mad.
I like the ones who ask the questions so they can know.
Yes.
And even if they think that I'm not qualified to give them the answer, and they're asking that question to try and disqualify me from my position. And that's fine. I'm like, I should be able to defend it at any given time. If I'm going to stand in that role, then yeah, I should be able to defend it for any reason at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to have one that did it all the time. And it's kind of like, man, you have to keep in mind there's stuff that I've forgotten. Because it's not necessary. It's not important. It's not anything. Yeah, it might be curriculum somewhere, but in real life, it doesn't really play out like that. And so I like it when those come around, because it's like, oh wait, let me dig deep.
Yeah.
I gotta dig deep and think about some shit. But Um,
But there's a difference in being humble and saying like, I don't know that answer. Let me get back to you. Versus like, let me just bullshit it.
yeah,
Um, and people will humble you in a heartbeat. I had one humble me 2 days ago that I'm like, never heard of this one before. Let me call somebody that knows. That's fine. I appreciate that, but it also makes me a better provider, a better learner at the backside of it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I uh, I have not been in a teaching role in quite some time. Um, I don't really want to be, uh, but the environment that I work in now, it's not an emergency environment, and so there are times where I get to kind of flex that real world knowledge, and it's always funny to me because there's two of the people that are always like, "Nuh-uh, that ain't real." I'm like, "Yeah, it I was there." And then there's others who are really, um, really always interested and really always curious about it. And there's um, they know a lot about what they know about, but they don't know much about what I know about. And I know some of what they know, but not the way that they know it. So it's a really good dynamic, and that they're like, oh well, I can see this, and I know what this is, and I'm like, well, this is how this plays out in you know 2 steps down the road in a real
Hmm.
person's life. So it's a pretty cool environment.
Yeah, so when I was in a leadership role at my last full time employer, and I really enjoyed that responsibility because it taught me a lot about myself. But one of the things, just like you mentioned, is like I knew a good bit about some things, but there's some things I didn't know anything about, and being able to uh, pick off the guys that like I was working with. There were several instances where we would go up, and I'm like, all right, man, you tell me what you need, and we'll facilitate it. And they went, and they're like, hey, boss, this is what I got. This is what we need to do. Like, all right, like I trust you. I know you know what you're doing. Let's make it happen. And every time those calls played out exactly the way I wanted them to.
Yeah, it's. I was in a leadership role for a while recently, and I would, when I would make contact with the people that I was over, it was always the same question: what do you need?
Mm-hmm.
What do you need to do your job well today? It's like I'm not going to do your job for you. It's your job to do your job.
Mm-hmm.
But if you need something to do your job well, I'll make it happen.
And I'm not saying this to fluff you up as a person, but like you did very well at that role.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
me as a ground person on that role, like that was the leadership we needed the entire time.
And
Um,
I didn't come up with that. I I experienced that, and so I'm gonna have to throw a shoe at her.
I, I used to work with the Army Colonel and his that process, and I adopted this as mine. But it was if you do something right, that is your if you do something wrong, it's my fault. Either I failed to train you, I failed to give you proper instructions, or I failed to show you how it needs to be done. So, as a leader, that's kind of how I did business on that end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It for me, I think I want to go out to the world with the idea that everybody who's doing something wants to do it, and they probably want to do it well. And the last thing they really need is somebody, you know, picking apart everything they did, looking for something wrong.
Hmm.
I cannot imagine how many things I did wrong.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think that there's a net that, you know, all right, so I didn't do this completely right, but overall, I got to where I wanted to be. So, you know, I'm a firm believer that I've always been like, just let me do it. Correct me if I need to be corrected, but correct me with dignity,
Yes.
you know? And if you can't correct me, then don't criticize me.
Hmm.
And but there were people in that while I was in that role that I just knew like you're just a dud. You're just spare parts and you know whatever. But then there were other people. It's like, no, yeah, you know, you got to let people shine because they want to.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Hell yeah, something just broke in your house.
Yes, it did. It's okay. I dropped something.
I guess that holster wasn't so great.
Oh. I, I don't have it on me today, so we're all right.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, cool talk, man.
Yeah, it's. I think it was well worth it.
Absolutely. Let's do it again soon. Try and find some good stories and some just stories. And
Some just ones. All
yeah,
right.
like I just well, like I think I'm going to make it a point that anytime we meet up, that I'm going to be able to tell you a good story.
Okay.
That's I'm going to look for it. I'm going to look for these good stories, and I am going to look at how points of that could be incorporated into my life.
I like that.
Yeah. So, well, cool beans.
Well, all right. Good talk, man. And
Absolutely.
look forward to it again.
Absolutely. And maybe we can get someone else to join in with us and bring another perspective. That would be fun sometime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if you're one of the 4 people who watched and you want to be a part, you want to ask questions, you want to share your wisdom and your whatever you got, jump in.
Yeah. And if you got questions for the two of us on how like because it's cool to have questions for each other, but when somebody else is questioning you, I think that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And you know, I think that I think that what will make this special is that you and I are 2 very different people. We come from 2 very different
Yeah.
places. And but we can find that intersection of where my wisdom and your wisdom come together to make at least 2 better men in the world.
And that's the biggest thing, man. Just trying to become better versions of ourselves, whether it's physically, working out, doing things, or just emotionally, spiritually, things like that. I think that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Well, that'll do it for today. If you are one of the 4 people and you don't mind, hit the like button down there and subscribe and I don't know all that stuff. I'm not going to email you. I'm not going to spam.
Yeah.
So, have a good night. Stay safe. Love each
Bye.
other. I have lost my button. There it is.